I'd like to introduce someone who's been a very strong supporter of Mr. Diab now, MP Don Davies. Don, please step forward and speak very close to the mic.
Thank you very much. First, I want to acknowledge the unceded territory of the Indigenous people of the Ottawa Valley, on whose land and by whose grace we gather here today. I also want to thank each and every one of you who have taken time out of your lives to be here and advocate for something that I think is one of the most fundamental concepts of the Canadian culture, society, and history, and that's a matter of fundamental justice. I want to start by speaking a little bit about what I do not know. I do not know Hassan Diab. I have never met him, nor his family. I do not know who was responsible for the bombing in Paris in 1980, that tragic and terrible crime where 4 people lost their lives and dozens more were injured. But I'll tell you what I do know. I know that Hassan Diab is a man who has passionately denied any involvement whatsoever in that crime, who strongly appears to be a victim of mistaken identity, who was very likely not even present in France at the time the crime was committed, who has no history of violence or anti-Semitism whatsoever. I know that Hassan Diab is a Canadian citizen, a respected academic, a husband and father, and an upstanding member of our community. I know that Hassan Diab is exceptionally well educated and was a professor here in Ottawa when he was arrested in 2009, some 19 years after that crime was committed. I know that Hassan Diab is a scholar whom his colleagues have expressed great shock and doubt that he could have had anything whatsoever to do with that crime, and who attest to his excellent character. I know that Hassan Diab is a man who was subjected to extremely weak Canadian extradition laws. The presiding judge called the evidence against him weak, expressed serious doubt that he would be committed to trial or convicted were those charges to be laid in Canada, and expressed regret that he was unable to grant Hassan Diab bail, which he would have otherwise done. I know that Hassan Diab is a Canadian who was extradited to France by a Harper-era justice minister and conservative government that continually interjected ideological and partisan bias into decisions of justice. I know that the crime for which Hassan Diab is charged is a highly politically charged one in France, made even more political by subsequent political and terrorist attacks in France. In fact, the laws at issue in this case were crafted in times of panic, political pressure, and indeed public pandering. I know that the evidence presented against Hassan Diab has been roundly and repeatedly demonstrated to be seriously flawed and unreliable. It has been called demonstrably false, confusing and incomprehensible, problematic and convoluted, and filled with suspect conclusions. Moreover, the case against him has been changed by the prosecution on a number of occasions, usually after the fundamental premises have been proved by the defense to be false or totally unreliable or wrong. I also know that Hassan Diab is a product, his case against him is the product of questionable intelligence, which is highly unreliable. And finally, I know that Hassan Diab is a Canadian citizen who has been ordered released on bail 6 times by French judges, only to have those decisions overturned in what I believe are overtly political decisions. I want to just briefly mention Canada's weak extradition system, which I think is in serious need of repair, and for which I think Hassan Diab is paying an unacceptable price. Our extradition system appears to prioritize foreign relations above Canadians' rights to a fair trial, acceptable standards of evidence, and perhaps even the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Constitutional law expert and author of a book on extradition, Gary Botting, calls the Canadian process the most unfair one in Canada. Of all the legal processes, that's what he described the extradition process to be. In other words, if the case would not meet Canadian standards for proceeding to trial, why would it be allowed to be the basis for uprooting this man and traumatizing his family? So today, I call on the Canadian government to immediately instruct its diplomats to convey to French authorities the need to comply with the 6 separate French court's orders to release Hassan Diab on bail. I call on the Canadian government to press the French authorities to either schedule a trial forthwith and either present the full evidence against Hassan Diab and allow him to make full answer, or dismiss the charges against him immediately for want of prosecution. I point out that Hassan has been in jail in France going on 3 years as an innocent man waiting to face the charges against him. And last, I call on the Canadian government to give Hassan Diab the full consular support of the Canadian government to ensure his fair and swift access to justice in France, which I have no doubt will result in speedy dismissal of these charges and a return of Hassan Diab back to Canada, his family and his life as he's entitled. I want to end by, saying once again what has already been said about what Prime Minister Trudeau said when he was in opposition about Stephen Harper, when Stephen Harper was lagging on the unjust case of Mohamed Fahmy in 2015. In 2015, Mr. Trudeau told Mr. Harper that Canada has an obligation to use the full force of the Prime Minister's office to help Canadian citizens when they are unjustly imprisoned abroad. His inaction must end today, end quote. My friends, my sisters and brothers, we ask no more and no less for Hassan Diab today. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, and we won't stop working until Hassan Diab receives justice. Thank you very much.